Welcome to Civil Services Achievers Point. We are discussing today the Assam Tribune of 19th August 2020. At Civil Services Achievers Point, we have various offline classes, online live classes, we have free initiatives and mock interview programs. Also, we are coming up very soon with optional classes, ethics classes and CSET classes. This Assam Tribune analysis is based on the new pattern of APSC. However, it is also useful for UPSC and other state level government examinations. These are the important newspaper articles which we are discussing today. We will also discuss an important editorial from today's newspaper. So students, let us begin. The first topic which we are discussing today is the Naga Peace Talks. Center involves all stakeholders. This topic we will study under General Studies 3 security topic. The background is there has been a paradigm shift in the process of talks for a permanent solution of the Naga political issues after Narendra Modi assumed office as the Prime Minister, and from exclusive talks, the talks have become inclusive. That is, with the talks, multiple stakeholders of Naga society have brought into the domain of the talks. The talks with the National Socialist Council of Nagalim, in short NSCN-IM, started way back in 1997, but for ages, the government was not trying to include the other stakeholders in the process. Though the NSCN-K had also signed ceasefire agreement for a brief period, no formal talk was held with the outfit. Sources said that immediately after assuming office as the Prime Minister, Modi took a stand that the talks would have to be inclusive and all the stakeholders should be taken on board for permanent solution of the issues. The government's stand is now very clear. The government is of the view that it would not be possible to find a permanent solution to the problems only by talking to one rebel group. The government wants that all the rebel groups as well as the elected representatives and tribal bodies would have to be taken on board. So multiple stakeholders such as the other rebel groups, the elected representatives and the tribal bodies would be taken on board. Sources reveal that a section of leaders of the NSCN IM did not like the idea of engaging the other rebel groups in the process, and so far they have not set with the other rebel factions together. So it is seen that a section of leaders of the NSCN IM did not like the idea of engaging with the other rebel groups or militant groups in the process, and so far they have not set with the other rebel factions together. But the government is firm with that there would be only one accord. Okay, the government has made their stand clear that there would be only one accord for solution of the Naga issue, and all the rebel groups would have to sign the same accord. The government is also keen that the leaders of the tribal groups of Nagaland should also sign the accord. So apart from the rebel groups, the government is also keen that the leaders of the tribal groups of Nagaland should also sign the accord. Sources pointed out that after the signing of the framework agreement between the government of India and the NSCN IM in way back 2015, the other active rebel groups of Nagaland formed an umbrella body called Naga National Political Groups NNPG and started talking with the government. The NNPG also signed a framework agreement with the government in November 2017. Most of the Indian origin members of the NSCN-K have also come our ground to join the peace process. On the progress of talks, sources said that all the issues have been settled with the NNPG, that is the umbrella body, and the organization is ready to sign the accord at any time. Though most of the substantive issues with the NSCN IM have also been settled, the outfit has raised some other issues like a separate flag and a separate constitution, which are yet to be settled by the government. The government told the NSCN IM leaders that after a settlement, the people of Nagaland can raise those issues democratically. Most organizations in Nagaland are of the view that Article 371A, the Article 371A provides special status to Nagaland, special provisions for Nagaland. So most organizations in Nagaland are of the view that Article 371A should not be diluted, and the government has accepted the same demand. The rebel groups gave up the demand for sovereignty after the government made it clear that it would not be possible for the government to accept the demand, and the solution would have to come under the provisions of the Constitution of India. On the demand for inclusion of territories of other states, the government made it clear that it would not impose any such decision on the other state governments, because as we know that significant Naga population also resides in some parts of Arunachal Pradesh, some parts of Assam, and some parts of Manipur. So these states have apprehensions or concerns regarding any settlement between Naga rebel groups and the government of India. The center made it clear that it would not force any such decision on any state. Clarifying the government's view on shared sovereignty, sources said the Constitution of India provides for sharing of sovereign powers between the center and the states. Some subjects are in the central list and some in the state list. The state governments have the power over the issues in the state list. So, the government has made its stand clear. The Constitution of India provides for sharing of sovereign powers. So some subjects are in the central list, which are in the domain of the central government, and some are in the state list, which are under the domain of the state governments. The state governments have the power over the issues in the state list. Now coming to the next important topic, COVID-19 Sero survey begins in Guwahati. This topic we will study under General Studies on Assam, Governance and Social Justice. Health Minister of Assam, Himanta Biswa Sharma, today said ICMR has begun a Sero survey in Guwahati to gauge the city's exposure to the COVID-19 virus. So this is a very important development. What is a Sero survey? The Sero survey, also called serological survey, involves collection of blood samples to determine whether a person is infected with the novel coronavirus. It will also be used to detect whether the person was infected with the virus in the past and identify antibodies being produced to combat COVID-19. The survey began on Sunday, Sharma informed. On Monday, 2,792 fresh positive cases were identified in the state, taking the state's coronavirus tally to 79,667. The death toll so far is 197, while 55,215 patients have been discharged. On an average, we are getting 2,000 to 2,200 to 2,700 cases every day. This is because we are doing 50,000 tests every day. So the number of tests being done is very high. The positivity rate is around 4 to 5%. The doubling rate has also increased to 17 days, which indicates that the graph has slowed down a bit. Among the casualties, 51 were reported from Kamrup Metro alone, followed by 21 in Dibrugarh and 18 in Tinsukia. Also, around 368 patients have been administered plasma therapy till date in the state. So now coming to the next important topic, India's fresh bid to boost ties with Bangladesh. Now this topic we will study under General Studies 2 paper, topic International Relations. In a fresh attempt to boost ties with Bangladesh, India has sent Foreign Secretary Harsh Vardhan Shringla on a 2-day visit to Dhaka from Tuesday. The Ministry of External Affairs said that the visit was to take forward cooperation on matters of mutual interest. Shringla, accompanied by Indian High Commissioner Riva Ganguly Das, is likely to meet Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. He will also meet Bangladesh Foreign Minister Dr. A.K. Abdul Momen, besides having a bilateral meeting with his counterpart Masood bin Mom. Sources said the visit will see the Foreign Secretary doing a round of routine bilateral review meetings that could not be held due to the coronavirus pandemic. Shringla's meeting with Bangladesh officials will also focus on containing the pandemic. The ongoing visit is crucial in the backdrop of the bilateral relations between these two neighboring countries passing through bumpy weather. Dhaka is seen to be trying to distance itself from India, allegedly under the influence of China. So this is an important development, the influence of China in India's immediate neighborhood. Both the countries have, however, dismissed all such rumors. China had sent medical teams and proposed to undertake human trial for their vaccine in Bangladesh. However, the Bangladesh government had put the proposal on hold after New Delhi quietly protested through diplomatic channels. This is despite the fact that India rushed PPE and other health equipment to Bangladesh in the fight against coronavirus pandemic. India also proposed to send medical experts, which has not been agreed to by Dhaka so far. Now coming to the next topic, ASTC introduces Uberization scheme. Now this is an important topic with respect to the transport and industries topic, geography of Assam. For the paper GS5, that is General Studies on Assam. The government of Assam, as announced in the budget speech of 2019, has introduced a new scheme named as Uberization, which will be implemented by the Assam State Transport Corporation, ASTC. For successful implementation of this scheme, the state government will provide subsidies to the beneficiaries. This amount will be 25% of the total cost of the buses. The remaining 75% of the cost of the buses will have to be borne by the beneficiaries under the scheme. Out of the 25% is sanctioned by the government, 15% is refundable and 10% is non-refundable if the beneficiary operates the bus for 5 years under ASTC. This was announced by the chairperson of the ASTC. At a press conference, further the chairman stated that assuming the cost of vehicle for a super bus at rupees 40 lakh and rupees 24 lakh for an inter-district or a city bus, the government has decided to procure 668 buses. The Uberization scheme will cover every nook and corner of the state, including Guwahati city, BTAD, hilly areas, Diffu, Haflong, Lamding, and Lanka, tea garden areas, developing areas such as Majuli, Dhemaji, Dhuburi, and Sadia. The government has also decided to introduce city bus services in 4 major towns of the state shortly. Means city bus right now is only in Guwahati, but the towns like Jorhat, Silchar, Dibrugarh, and Tezpur will also get city buses. Describing about the beneficiaries, the chairman further said that they must be individual entrepreneurs, partnership firm, or startup companies. Each beneficiary will get a maximum of 5 buses and they must operate a bus for a minimum period of 5 years under the ASTC. The beneficiary will get all the public service facilities at ASTC bus terminuses. Chairman also distributed identity cards for media persons among a section of media personnel. Now coming to our next topic, proposals worth rupees 12 lakh crore received under the PLI scheme. Now the PLI scheme is in news, so we will see what is the PLI scheme. This topic we will study under the economic development topic paper, General Studies 3 paper. Union Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad today said proposals worth rupees 12 lakh crore have been received under the new scheme to boost electronics manufacturing, and some manufacturing lines have moved from China to India during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it is said that proposals worth rupees 12 lakh crore have been received under the new scheme to boost electronics manufacturing, and some manufacturing lines have already moved from China to India during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Minister for IT and Communications, while speaking at an industry event, also pointed out that close to rupees 90,000 crore have been transferred by way of direct benefit transfer. All the top mobile manufacturers and their contract manufacturers have applied in that PLI scheme, including 5 global champions and 5 national champions, and collectively they have promised to make mobile phone and components worth rupees 12 lakh crore in the coming 5 years, out of which they are going to export rupees 7 lakh crore worth of items and give direct and indirect jobs to 12 lakh people. So this is a huge development in our job opportunities and employment scenario. He added that 8 to 9 manufacturing lines have also shifted from China to India, the government notified 3 schemes on April 1 for the promotion of electronics. These were schemes for manufacturing of electronic components and semiconductors, modified electronics manufacturing clusters, EMC 2.0 scheme, and a production linked incentive, that is PLI scheme, for large scale electronics manufacturing. These schemes jointly offer incentives of around rupees 50,000 crore over the period of next 5 years. Under the PLI scheme, iPhone maker Apple's contract manufacturers, firms like Samsung, Micromax, Lava, and Dixon have applied. Prasad further said that the government has leveraged technology in a number of areas like healthcare and education to provide support to citizens during the pandemic. Out of the rupees 1,70,000 crore that the Prime Minister announced for the whole COVID-19 package for the poor, close to 90,000 crore have been transferred by way of direct benefit transfer to the accounts of people. Therefore, the larger DBT narrative which we have sent around close to rupees 11 lakh crore in the last 5.5 years was further reinforced in the COVID-19 crisis. Prasad said that the postal department had also bolstered the efforts. Postal department has a wide network all over the country. They not only delivered medicine and other gears in the country, but also delivered close to rupees 2,500 crore in the remotest villages where there is no bank or ATM. So coming to the next topic, government considering giving MSME status to dealers as announced by the Minister Gadkari. This topic we will study under the economic development topic under the paper General Studies 3 paper. The government is considering according MSME status to dealers as it will enable them to avail benefits offered to the micro, small and medium enterprises. Micro, small and medium enterprises comprising manufacturing and services units need to get registered to avail the benefits and subsidies offered under various government schemes. Registered MSMEs are eligible for tariff subsidies as well as tax and capital subsidies. The registration also helps them in getting government tenders and enables easier access to loans at low interest rates. Regarding MSME, we are thinking now of giving MSME status to dealers also, and they will get benefit of it. That is also under consideration by which they will get the benefits. The minister also reiterated his appeal to major industries to clear the outstanding dues to MSMEs in a timely manner. We are also requesting to the finance ministry, the industries who want to make their technology centers, training centers, research centers from income tax point of view, whether we are in a position to give some more support to them by which we can inspire and motivate them for more research and innovation. The Minister for MSME and Road Transport and Highways was addressing a virtual exhibition on construction equipment, technology components and aggregates. Gadkari said to achieve the objective of self-reliance, the country needs to reduce imports and boost manufacturing of various components in sectors like automobiles and construction equipment. So further, the minister said to achieve the objective of Atmanirbhar Bharat, that is self-reliance India, the country needs to reduce imports and boost manufacturing of various components in sectors like automobiles and construction equipment. He appealed to the industry he appealed to the industry to develop industrial clusters, technology centers, research labs, and go for upgradation of technology and skills. He assured the stakeholders of all possible support in developing technology centers in India. The minister called for research, innovation, and technology upgradation and emphasized the need for joint ventures and foreign collaborations to get easy finance and compatible technology. Now coming to the next important topic, government launches rupees 4.3 crore contest for the development of tech products using indigenous microprocessors. Now this topic we will study under science and technology topic for General Studies 3 paper. The Ministry of Electronics and IT today launched a rupees 4.3 crore contest for development of technology products using microprocessors developed by IIT Madras and Center for Development of Advanced Computing, that is CDAC. IIT Madras and the Center for Development of Advanced Computing (CDAC) have developed two microprocessors named Shakti 32-bit and Vega 64-bit respectively, using open source architecture, which will be made available for the contest. Electronics and IT Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad launched the Swadeshi Microprocessor Challenge, Innovate Solutions for Atmanirbhar Bharat, to provide further impetus to the strong ecosystem of startups, innovation and research in the country. This is the third technology contest within this fiscal year for development of indigenous technology. The previous two contests were for development of indigenous video conferencing solutions as well as apps in various categories. Swadeshi Microprocessor Challenge, Innovate Solutions for Atmanirbhar Bharat, seeks to invite innovators, startups and students to use their microprocessors to develop various technology products. The contest aims at not only meeting India's future requirements of strategic and industrial sectors, but also has the potential to mitigate the issues of security, licensing, technology obsolescence, and most crucially, cutting dependency on imports. The contest will end on June 2021. Now coming to the next important topic, 41 lakh youth lost jobs in India as per the International Labour Organization and Asian Development Bank report. As many as 41 lakh youth in the country lost jobs due to the COVID-19 pandemic, while construction and farm sector workers account for the majority of job losses, according to a joint report by the International Labour Organization and the Asian Development Bank, that is ILO and ADB. For India, the report estimates job loss for 4.1 million youth. Construction and agriculture have witnessed the major job losses among 7 key sectors, said the ILO ADB report, titled Tackling the COVID-19 Youth Employment Crisis in Asia and the Pacific. The young people's employment prospects in Asia and the Pacific are severely challenged due to the pandemic, it added. Youth 15 to 24 years will be hit harder than adults 25 and older in the immediate crisis and risk bearing higher longer-term economic and social costs. The report is based on regional assessment of the global survey on youth and COVID-19 and arrived at estimates based on available unemployment data in different countries. It said that in India, 2/3 of firm-level apprentices and 3/4 of internships were completely interrupted during the pandemic. The report calls on governments in the region to adopt urgent, large-scale and targeted measures to generate jobs for the youth, keep education and training on track, and to minimize future scaring of more than 660 million young people in the region. Even before the COVID-19 crisis, youth in Asia and the Pacific faced challenges in the labor market, resulting in high unemployment rates and large shares of youth excluded from both school and work. In 2019, the regional youth unemployment rate was 13.8% compared to 3% for adults, and more than 160 million youth, that is 24% of the population, were not in employment, education or training. Four in 5 young workers in the region were engaged in informal employment, a higher share than among adults, and 1 in 4 young workers was living in conditions of extreme or moderate poverty. The pre-crisis challenges for youth are now amplified since COVID-19 hit. Without sufficient attention, our fear is that the risks creating a lockdown generation that could feel the weight of this crisis for many years to come. Mentioned by the lead author of the report and head of the ILO Regional Economic and Social Analysis Unit. The report cites 3 ways in which young people are affected in the current crisis. These are job disruptions in the form of reduced working hours and earnings, and job losses for both paid workers and self-employed, disruptions in their education and training, and difficulties in transitioning from school to work and moving between jobs in recession. Youth unemployment rates in the region increased sharply in the first quarter of 2020 from the last quarter of 2019, it said. Now coming to our next topic, states can't decide to confer degrees without exams as per the UGC. This topic will study under General Studies 2 paper, topic Governance and Social Justice. The UGC told the Supreme Court on Tuesday that its July 6 directive asking universities and colleges to conduct final exams by September 30 amid the COVID-19 pandemic is not a diktat, but states cannot take decision to confer degrees without holding the examination. Solicitor General Tushar Mehta, appearing for the University Grants Commission (UGC), told a bench headed by Justice Ashok Bhushan that the directive is for the benefit of students as the universities have to start admissions to postgraduate courses and state authorities cannot override the UGC's guideline. The bench, also comprising Justices R.S. Reddy and M.R. Shah, observed that the issue is if the state disaster management authority has decided that situation is not conducive for holding exams, can they overrule the UGC? The bench, which reserved its verdict on a batch of petitions questioning the validity of the UGC's July 6 directive, said that another issue which is whether the commission can override state authorities and ask the universities to hold examinations on given dates. During the hearing conducted through video conferencing, Mehta told the bench that states might seek extension of the deadline, but they cannot take the decision to confer degrees without holding the exams. The deadline was given for benefit of the students. It is not a dictate. Mehta told the bench, adding that all universities have to start admissions of postgraduate courses. The country is working. He argued that COVID-19 is a national disaster and the state authorities cannot override the UGC. The bench observed that it has to be kept in mind that welfare of students is not for the students to decide, and it is for the statutory body to take decision in this regard. It observed that another issue was whether the state can take decision under the Disaster Management Act and say that they would not hold examinations and declare results based on the past performances of a student. Advocate Alok Srivastava, appearing for some of the petitioners, told the bench that UGC's July 6 guidelines makes it mandatory for universities to hold exams by September 30, and the decision was taken without proper consultation. Now coming to our next topic, no exception can be taken on PM CARES fund by Supreme Court. This topic we will study under the governance topic under paper General Studies 2. PM CARES fund has been constituted with an objective to extend assistance in the wake of public health emergency like COVID-19, and no exception can be taken at this need of the hour in its constitution, the Supreme Court said. The apex court noted that it was created as a dedicated national fund with an objective of dealing with any kind of emergency or distress situation as posed by the COVID-19 pandemic and to provide relief to the affected. A bench headed by Justice Ashok Bhushan said it is for the central government to take the decision as from which fund what financial measures are to be taken, and it is neither for PIL petitioner to claim that any financial assistance to be made from particular fund or not, nor this court to sit in judgment over the financial decisions. The observations came on a PIL filed by NGO seeking direction that all the money collected under the PM CARES fund for the COVID-19 pandemic should be transferred to the NDRF. The center had told the top court that Prime Minister is the ex officio chairman of the PM CARES fund, and Minister of Defense, Minister of Home Affairs and Minister of Finance of Government of India are ex officio trustees of the fund. Taking note of the submissions, the apex court said that the PM CARES fund is a public charitable trust and is not a government fund. The bench said it consists entirely of voluntary contributions from individuals and organizations and does not get any budgetary support. It is not open for the petitioner to question the wisdom of trustees to create PM CARES fund, which was constituted with an objective to extend assistance in the wake of public health emergency, that is pandemic COVID-19. Senior advocate Dusan Dave, appearing for the NGO, had argued that he was not questioning the bona fide of constitution of PM CARES Fund. He had submitted that PM CARES Fund should not have been constituted when NDRF is already in place to take care of disasters. Dave also said that NDRF is audited by CAG, but PM CARES Fund is not audited by CAG, rather by a private chartered account. The guidelines issued under Disaster Management Act 2005 with regard to NDRF specifically provides for audit of the NDRF by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, whereas for public charitable trust, there is no occasion for audit by the CAG at this need of the hour. No exception can be taken to the constitution of a public charitable trust, namely PM CARES fund, to have necessary financial resources to meet the emergent situation, said the bench. Now we will discuss an important editorial from our exam perspective, future of Indo-China relationship, under General Studies 2 paper, topic international relations. China and India are two ancient civilizations having shared a close and dynamic socio-cultural history. Both the countries have had extensive historical and cultural contacts since the first century before, and especially with the transmission of Buddhism from India to China. The first records of contact between China and India were written during the 2nd century BC. Trade relations via the Silk Route acted as an economic contact between the two regions. Chinese monk Pa Hien visited India in AD 402, stayed for 10 years, and after his return, translated many texts into Chinese. His record of journeys, Poguzi, is an important historical source. In the 5th century AD, Bodhidharma, a South Indian monk, became the first patriarch of the Shaolin monastery in China. Wenzhang visited India during the 5th century AD. During the 7th century AD, his journey became part of the traditional Chinese lore captured in his book called A Journey to the West. Dr. Dwarkanath Potnis, known in China as K. Dinhua, was amongst the Indian physicians who volunteered to provide medical assistance during the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1938. They were warmly welcomed by Mao Zedong, Zhu De, and other top leaders of the Communist Party of China. He devoted his life, died in China in 1942, and was buried in Nangquan village in China. Many Indians sacrificed lives to build the Stilwell Road during the World War II, when China was cut off with the rest of the world. India, which gained its independence in 1947, was the earliest country to recognize China after its liberation in 1949 and established diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China in 1950. One of the most basic and driving policies for the Indian government after independence was that of maintaining cordial relations with China. The Indian government wished to revive its ancient friendly ties with China. In August 1950, China expressed its gratitude to India's attempts to stabilize the Indo-Chinese border. Later in September 1951, India declined to attend a conference in San Francisco for the conclusion of a peace treaty with Japan because China, which India viewed as an important factor in this treaty, was not invited because of its status as an internal pariah. In the subsequent years, India strove to become China's representative in world matters, as China had been isolated from many issues. India vigorously pressed since the start of the 1950s for China to be included within the UN. In 1954, China and India concluded the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, or the Panchshil Niti. It is a matter of record that India refused to take a permanent seat in a UN Security Council when offered at the cost of China. There are allegations by several countries of Chinese aggregation and illegal occupation and claim on their land or sea, which include Bhutan, Taiwan, Brunei, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, North Korea, South Korea, Japan, Nepal, Russia, and few Central Asian countries. India has all along maintained a friendly policy, but in 1962, China made an aggression to occupy part of India and still has under its occupation parts of India. India since the beginning has a history of never occupying any foreign land. India has a population of 1.34 billion people and China has 1.39 billion people. The total land area of India is 29,73,190 square kilometer, whereas China has a much larger total land area. It is reported China and India till a few centuries back shared almost 2/5 of the world GDP, with 35% of the world population. Both the countries together can still reach a decent position. History records the barbarian aggression of Genghis Khan, of which China was also a sufferer. It is not clear if modern China sorry, it is not clear if modern China wishes to act like the then Mongolian warrior with modern day weapons and wishes to extend its territory limits. History further records that such invasion, even wishes and occupation do not last long. The world is moving fast in this technology driven world. Various kinds of pressures, including electronic and cosmic rays, are abrupting and influencing our fast lifestyle with which we need to constantly combat. Last, peace and tranquility are perhaps every human being's inner wish, no matter which part of the global fate color he or she may be formed. India believes officially in Vasudhaiva Kudumbatam, that is, the world is a family. Indians believe in yoga and spirituality. One believes China and Chinese also believe in this motto, and there is no better example than China and India, two ancient civilizations to remain in harmony but need not to be in at uniformity. It is unfortunate the work done since 1988 to repair the damage of 1962 has been brought to naught by the recent episode of Galwan Valley, where 20 Indian soldiers and unknown numbers of Chinese soldiers sacrificed their lives. It is very distressing for thousands like me in India and China who have spent part of their life working together with hope, which it now appears illusionary or similar historic relations in modern times between the two great countries. So students, with this we come to an end to today's Assam Tribune analysis. At Civil Services Achievers Point, we have various offline regular classes, online live classes, free initiatives and mock interviews. We are also coming up with optional class, ethics class and CSAT class. For further details, please call the number given below. Also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube and Telegram. So students, that's it for today. Thank you.